Welcome to the Josh Hall Web Design Show. Helping you build better websites and create a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
Hey everybody, welcome into episode 53. So this is a very different type of episode. This is kind of a case study. It is a behind the scenes or maybe peek behind the curtain look into what went on recently with selling my web design business. So over the past few episodes, you've probably heard me talk about the fact that late spring 2020 here, I sold my web design agency and I still do own a percentage of it. And we worked out a great deal so I can still, oversee the processes and the team and have some good contact with my best clients. But I did sell the agency so I could focus full time on what I'm doing here with joshhall.co. And it's been one heck of a journey. I've learned so much over the past few months, and I wanted to just kind of share with you guys what I've learned. But I didn't want to just share from my perspective as somebody who sold the business. I also wanted to bring in the guy who purchased the business, and that's Eric Dingler. And you probably recognize his name because I had him on the podcast previously in episode 23, because he's been a student of mine for a few years now. And I kind of saw and helped him grow his business and saw him grow his business to six figures. And as you'll hear, I felt like he was going to be a great fit for me. But the reason I wanted to have him on this as well is I wanted you to hear things from his perspective as somebody who is acquiring the business. So you'll hear a lot of, my perspective as somebody who wanted to sell the business, but then you'll hear on his end with acquiring it, what it looked like. And I think this is going to be valuable for so many of you, even if you're not interested in selling your business. I know a lot of my students are interested in setting up a business to eventually sell it. So this is going to be right down your alley. But even if you're not interested in selling, or maybe, you just want to have some reference point for if the day ever comes, this is going to be super beneficial for you because I just learned so much about how to organize a business better through these last few months. And you're going to hear a lot of things that I did well, but you're also going to hear a lot of lessons learned the hard way that Eric and I kind of had to work through together. And I will say the biggest lesson I learned, you'll hear this in the episode, but I'll just tell it to you right now as a quickie before we dive in. And that is you've got to get your business out of your head. You've got to get it on file. You've got to have some sort of SOP, a standard operating procedure, or the main things on file somewhere that somebody else could assist with, whether you want to stay a solopreneur or not. It's just good to get things out of your head because I really realized through this process that, man, I had a lot of stuff in my head that I had to get out and give to Eric during this period. So you're going to hear a lot about that, and you're going to hear a lot about how you can set up your business to sell one day. Or again, even if you're not interested in selling, you just want to have an organized business for whatever the future holds, this is going to be invaluable for you, and it's going to be a great resource. Now, before we dive in, one thing I realized and one thing I found out when I talked to a lot of people who sold businesses in the past is that if you are your business, if your business is entirely reliant on you and your mind, your business is not going to be worth that much. What you really want to have a valuable business to sell is some sort of recurring income that can be easily transferred over. And the best way to create a solid recurring income plan for your business is with a website hosting and maintenance plan. And if you're interested in starting a maintenance plan, or maybe you have one, but you're ready to take it to the next level, I have a maintenance plan course where I walk you through my entire plan, which is what Eric purchased. And honestly, it's what was the most value in my business, and it's what gave me the most leverage to sell the business was my maintenance plan. So if you don't have one, you need one. And if you have one and you're ready to take the next level, I want to help you do that. We can do that through my website maintenance plan that's ready for you to join right now. So I would love to help you create a super valuable asset in corporate business terms. In any case, guys, enjoy this case study style episode because Eric and I just opened up about our experience and it was fun, and we just out everything we've learned, and I really hope it's fun to listen to, kind of a fun peek behind the curtain, and it is good, some good value for you. So without further ado, enjoy. Eric, welcome on to the podcast again, man.
Josh, it is good to be back.
A little different circumstances this time because I had you on the podcast back on episode 23 when we talked about you taking your business to six figures. And since then, a couple things have changed because you have now taken over my business. And I figured what we'll do in this podcast, the reason I wanted to do this was I just thought it would be really cool for my audience to hear a little more about what went into selling a web design business from my perspective, but then also acquiring it from your perspective. And of course, what I'm really excited about is we worked out the deal to where, we're partners on this. I still have a percentage of the business to help keep me involved with the business, particularly on the high level stuff and managing you and the team. So with all that said, man, how do you feel right now? I mean, we've been through a wild few months.
It is good. Was unexpected. I tell people often that you reached out, I think in an email or something, it was like, hey, can we chat, next week sometime on the phone? And honestly, I thought you were calling to ask me to buy your most recent SEO course. You were in pre-sale, I think, at the time. And so that's what I thought you were calling for. And no, it was if I had any interest in buying in transit. So it's good. We're actually, as we're recording this right now, it's August 2020, and September 1st, I'm doing this full time. So yeah, so it's exciting.
So awesome, man. Yeah, I'm really excited and again, we'll talk about this from both perspectives, but the reason I wanted to do this right now is because this is fresh for us. We're still at the tail end of, really kind of getting everything squared away. So I thought it would be great to cover this in a lot of good detail. What I did, and I think you're looking at this as well, I broke this down into kind of 6 phases. So this is a different kind of episode. It's a case study style episode. And one thing I've always appreciated about you, Eric, is you're an open book. You're real. You're transparent. So I know we're going to talk about pretty much everything we experienced through this, all the goods. I was going to say all the bads, but we really didn't have any bads. But inevitably, there's difficulties and a lot of work that went into this. But I kind of laid out 6 phases, and I figured we could just kind of go through them one by one. I'll kind of talk about, things from my perspective, but I want to hear about yours as well.
Sounds great. I kept all the bad stuff for this.
Perfect.
Blindside you with it, and
publicly. That's perfect. Yes. Blindside. No. So phase 1, I call this phase 1, and I'm calling this when it's time. And I think this episode and these phases will be really impactful for people who one day want to sell their business, or maybe you don't want to sell your web design business, but you're just curious about, what goes into it. I think this will be a really good reference guide for you. And phase 1 for me was when I knew it was time. And I'll just start off by saying there was a few red flags for me that I realized, it was time. We talked about this, Eric, the first time we chatted then back in May. But I was doing a proposal for like a $4,000 website job. And this was back early spring this year and in 2020. And I just remember going through it and I just was like, I don't feel like doing this. Like that was the first time I was ever laying out a proposal for a decent sized job. It wasn't like a $1,000 job or something like that. It was a $4,000, that's a decent chunk of change type of job. And I was just like, I just don't feel like doing this anymore. And I want to make a big statement out front here. It's not that I was burnt out from web design or anything like that. It was that I had so much more I wanted to focus on with joshhall.co. Like that's when, this spring, to be transparent, stuff has just blown up with my courses and everything I've been working towards over the past few years with joshhall.co. It finally turned the corner. And this is where my passion is. And so I felt like that's another red flag I have, is I felt like I was giving kind of half-ass work to my clients within transit. And I knew that wasn't good. I kind of caught myself because I was spending more time with doing courses and joshhall.co, and I had started the podcast. So my first red flag was that. And then when I got to that proposal, I realized I've got to make a change. I've either got to bring somebody in or I need to to hand this out. Now, I didn't know exactly where to go about this. I didn't know whether to just bring somebody in to do project management and all that. But I realized, and this is just a big crucial lesson for anyone in business, to have a business move forward, you kind of have 2 things. You need somebody to market it and innovate it. And if you, as the solopreneur, are not doing that, then you need somebody to do that. You need to market, you need to innovate. I was not doing that within transit. Now, our numbers dipped a little bit in transparency within transit. Not terribly. The business wasn't crashing or anything, but the numbers did dip, and it's because of just that. I was not marketing and innovating because I was focused on joshhall.co. So I say that to say I recognize the red flags. I realized that, I needed to make a change, and that's what kind of spurred the deal, which is probably why you felt fairly surprised, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if I, led on to that at all, but that's probably why it was pretty surprising.
Yeah, no. Well, probably because I was only engaging with you on the course side, which was your passion side. And so I was experiencing the best of it.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's a good point.
And I would say not that any of, like, now that I've, been building relationships with the in-transit clients, not that any of the clients also were picking up on anything. Not to say that, but like you said, it just, like, you weren't marketing, you weren't innovating. There wasn't a stream of new things coming in and stuff like that. So, and I would say the only thing I would want to speak into that is if somebody hears that, like me, thinking back through listening, and even now listening to the podcast, if somebody said, phase one was I was working on a proposal and I didn't want to do it. Like that was a red flag. For me, I'll be honest, every time I work on a proposal, I don't want to do it. But it's just because I don't like that kind of work. It's important. It's got to be done, but it's not value adding to the client. It's not that innovative marketing. So if somebody hears that and they're like, oh, maybe I should sell my business. No, it just means you may not be doing the work in your business that brings you the most fulfillment.
That's a great point, Eric. I'm so glad you mentioned that because, yeah, that is, because that's a really good thing sometimes. If you get to that point where it's like, oh, I don't want to do this. Well, maybe you can hire that out, but you want to do the other stuff. For me, I'm glad you mentioned that because for me, it was the other stuff too. I was just thinking like, I don't want to do this proposal, but I don't even feel like doing the onboarding process or overseeing the project or even the offboarding. Like it just didn't. And again, it wasn't because I felt burnout or anything. It was because I had so much more that has been building up with joshhall.co. Like I had courses I need to start revising and so much more I wanted to do. And it was obviously where my passion had shifted. So that's a great point, because that is a really good thing when you realize like, I'm ready to hire this out, which I just got to this point this week. Cam, the VA for In Transit, is now going to be my virtual assistant for joshhall.co for editing and publishing and distributing all my podcasts, because I just got to the point with this to where I realized I'm kind of done with doing the editing of all the nitty gritty stuff. I want to start hiring this out to free me up. So it's a good thing. But for me, yeah, it was more than that. It was definitely the whole thing in general. Now, another point I made in this phase one was that before making a change like this, I wanted to make sure that I had a metaphor that a lot of people use is like when you're swinging from branches, you've got one income branch and you're swinging to another. You need to make sure that next branch is stable and secure, because the last thing you want to do is make a big business change and pivot and then, grab onto a little twig and then come plummeting to the ground. So for me, just in full transparency, I was making a lot more with courses than I was doing with In Transit in the beginning of this year. It just, again, I've been working really hard at it. It's when it started blowing up. And our numbers did dip, but we were still around the 6-figure range for In Transit. But really, for me, I felt like I would be stupid not to go for this, like not to really dive into joshhall.co and take it to the next level. So I say that to say, if you're in this position and you're thinking about selling now or maybe one day in the future, make sure that next income source is strong before you jump from one branch to another. And the last thing I did in phase one here for when it's time, when I knew it was time to make this change, is I was really big on seeking advice from close mentors. I have a few local colleagues who I knew sold businesses. And I don't know if I told you this, Eric, but I set up calls with them. I met with a mentor last fall. I kind of thought that I may be getting close to this. I didn't think it was going to happen this year. I thought it would happen in like 2021. But it kind of hit me and I realized I need to make that change. But I was already proactive in reaching out to mentors. So I met with a local guy, a mentor of mine, who had sold a couple different web businesses for like 7 figures. So he was the real deal. So we talked about that. He gave me some really good advice on how to pivot and what to do. And, making sure, again, I had that solid income on this new branch. But then I also talked with some people who sold businesses for much less. I talked to one guy who was an IT guy who basically just sold part of his business and then took a full-time job with his main client. I actually interviewed one of my colleagues who sold his video business, and that was episode, I think, 12 on the podcast with Doug Dybert, who sold a videography business. So I did a lot of research in preparation for this, which really helped me know when it's time. So I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Eric, or what it looked like from your end, but that's kind of what went into my phase one.
Yeah, no, same thing here. Making the decision to, take that now that we had, now that I was combining Coastal City Creative with In Transit Studios, like looking ahead. And I would say for me, the other thing that I took into consideration was, and I know you did too, not saying that you wouldn't, but our spouses were both married. So talking to our spouses, that was a bit, I didn't just walk out one day and say, hey, how do you think about not having a salary from somebody else, but it all be on me? How do you feel about it? Like, so, just having that conversation. So, so that was the big thing.
Yeah, it is. It's every aspect of life for sure. When you make a big change like this, I mean, In Transit has been my main income for over a decade, or almost a decade. This fall will be 10 years since I set up In Transit. So, almost a decade.
Your wife, you and your wife are a little more used to that. This is like, my wife is like, I know you well enough. Like, I don't know if I'm comfortable, just on you. So no, she didn't say that. But
yeah,
it is different for us. We've got 4 kids, obligations like everybody else. Like, it's a big deal.
Yeah, and then same thing here. With my wife and 2 kids and a hungry golden retriever. Like, I needed to make sure that what I do with JoshHall.co was, definitely reliable and secure and sustainable. But the really cool thing about this is we're going to talk about synergy with how we're working together, and both within Transit, but then also with what I'm doing with JoshHall.co. And that kind of segues me to phase 2, which for me was finding the right fit. Now, this was the struggle. This was the big one, because going back to the start of In Transit Studios, as I've talked about in previous episodes, I did not start the business in order to sell it. I didn't even technically, quote unquote, start the business. It just kind of happened. I just started doing graphic design, then web design on the side. Then I created the name, which was based off of my band's 3rd album at the time, In Transit.
Drummer.
I was a drummer.
Art is amazing.
Yeah, my business card had drum lessons on it in the first round. Like, it was very clear that I was not super business savvy. And I just kind of fumbled my way into it. And it was a couple years into it when I think I made like 30 grand while I was doing it part-time. And I was thinking, wow, I did like 30 grand, like part-time, just, in college and, taking night classes and working side jobs. What if I went full-time? So, that's when it all started for me. So I say that to say I never had the intention of selling, but as I've got to this point and as I'm doing what I'm really passionate about with JoshHall.co, with teaching other web designers, that's when I realized it was time to make this change. It certainly wasn't planned or anticipated, so I had to plan fairly quickly. But the big part of that was finding the right fit. Who would I trust? Which I'm sure we'll talk about the different avenues of bringing somebody in, which the phase 3 is making the deal, which we'll dive into next because we could talk about that. But I really was left with some choices. Do I want to just hire somebody? Do I want to bring somebody in as a partner? Do I want to sell it? But either way, I had to find the right person I felt comfortable with. And over the past about 2 years, I have had multiple people approach me about either purchasing the business or merging. And I never felt comfortable with any of them. I was left with kind of this weird gut feeling, like it just didn't feel right, which that's a business advice that anyone can follow. Trust your gut. If you feel like something feels weird or it's just not quite right, don't go for it. Trust your gut. And I did that. I had some close colleagues who, one was he has a popular media agency downtown in Columbus. He approached me a couple of years ago about purchasing In Transit and having me run the web design side, but I wasn't feeling that. I knew I was going to lose control, and I didn't want to have to leave to go to work downtown either. I wanted to work from home. And then I had a couple other colleagues who approached me about merging the businesses with their businesses, but again, it never felt right until I kept an eye on you, Eric, because you were a student of mine. I kind of watched you grow your business. I know you're a go-getter. I also knew that you were balancing that with being a pastor, and I was involved with several churches in the past, and I was never on staff, but the church that sent me to some community college classes for web design, I was kind of in the creative team there. And man, I'll tell you this, if anyone can handle being a pastor, they can handle doing web design. Like nothing, I don't think is harder than being in a pastoral role where you're mixing business with volunteer roles and stuff like that. So I knew, you were somebody who was strong that could handle it. And I watched you grow your business. I mean, our previous episode 23, was about how you grew your business to 6 figures. So I know you were on it. And then here's the big kicker for me. I don't know if I told you this yet. In the Facebook groups, I think it was one of the Facebook groups we're in, when COVID hit, a lot of people were kind of freaking out. A lot of people were talking about what they're going to do. You came in and you didn't have that approach at all. You said, here's something we're doing for our clients. We're being proactive. You're adding these headers. You're reaching out to them and saying like, hey, we could create a header that says, our hours are changed or we're temporarily closed. You were one that was not freaking out in that time. You were being proactive. And if I've learned anything, there's a great quote. I think it was Mr. Rogers who said, in times of struggle and strife, look for the helpers. And that was you. You helped your clients. And then I saw that right as I was going through this mindset shift of like, I'm ready to get out of these areas in the business. And I saw that and said, that's somebody who I would feel comfortable turning my clients to. So I felt like, you would be a really good fit, and I wanted to see if you're interested. So segue over to your thoughts on this. And it was really interesting because you and your wife had a conversation before our talk, which we could talk about here. But I reached out to you and said, hey, do you want to I wanted to set up a call. I was very vague. And then, as you mentioned, you were surprised. And what did that look like on your end? Because again, I know you and your wife talked about, making some changes, and then here comes my call.
Yeah, we were exploring, what was next for us, and things at the church are great. So we stepped into a church that we actually merged. So we moved to Virginia Beach in 2016 to plant a church. While here, this other church, a 150-year-old church, had died down to about 18 people. They just need somebody to preach for a couple of weeks. I wasn't sure. They said, we'll give you $200 a week. I went, okay. So went there, and very long story short, they ended up merging with us. And we're stepping out now. At the end of this month, we've installed a new senior pastor. The church is a few hundred people. It's doing very well. It's very healthy. It's completely focused on impacting the community and not serving themselves. It's just a great group of people, real healthy place. But through our adoption process, we just felt like the next thing we were being led to do is to start a nonprofit for helping people adopt. And we're also going to go into some countries and work to help indigenous people in their culture adopt their own orphans. So we were wanting to do that. Things were going really good with the business. I wasn't having to, as I was hearing you talk about the fact that we've merged 2 6-figure businesses, people might be thinking like, well, that's easy street. The thing is, yes, my business was up to 6 figures, but I was hardly taking a salary because I had my pastoral salary. So I had several freelancers on, that was doing the lion's share of the work. Well, now I'm to a point where I'm having to step back in and do a lot more of the work just to make sure that there's enough in the owner's pay account, every month. And so I have less because we both follow profit first. So I have less in my operating expense to use some freelancers right now. So I just couldn't see how I was going to make that step with the size of Coastal City Creative and have time to work on the nonprofit and all this stuff. And then boom, you called, and I'm like, hey, with the 2 combined, I think I can make this happen. And so it just, as a person of faith, and this isn't everybody that's listening, and that's fine. But, as a person of faith for me, I felt like it was a God thing. So
it'd be tough to say it was just a coincidence, because I think our call was on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, if I recall. And I think you talked to your wife like that Sunday, right? Yeah,
like we were talking about it driving home from church. So
it's so crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It was really cool. And it was so good for me to hear, because when you said that, it made me feel so relieved, because I knew you were like, I think the pressure of combining these businesses and then moving away from the church roles, it kind of forces you to go for this. If you had a stable job somewhere else, or this would be anybody, if I were to turn my clients over to anybody, I wouldn't want them to have a cozy job elsewhere, because there would be no reason. There would be no like fire behind, drive. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was actually, I think it really worked out in every best way, I feel like, because I just talked to you and I was pretty open right from the get-go. I was like, hey man, should have recorded that call. It would have been a fascinating call to listen back to. But I think I was just like, hey, man, I'm going to be honest. I'm at the point where I'm ready to start handing off my clients, and I'm ready to do Josh Hall for .co for full time. And you were just like, whoa. And then I remember you saying, well, first of all, I'm honored that you reached out, and, whatever happens here, I'm honored. I'm really excited. And then we just got the gears turning, man. Now, there was a lot that I did not know about you, but they ended up being all really good things. I knew that you were client-focused, client-centric, and you were big on vision, and you have a deeper meaning with being faith-based and also being one of the first things we initiated, thanks to you, within Transit was that 10% goes to our adoption fund right off, the profit margin. So you're big on having a lot more meaning and mission behind just, a business. So that was huge. What I did not know about you was how organized you were. And I think that you actually really helped me. I know we're going to talk about everything we did, but you helped me in a lot of those areas, particularly since you had been through merging a church. Because even though this was different, there were still a lot of things. Anytime you merge anything together, whether it's a church or whether it's a nonprofit or whether it's small businesses or big businesses, there's a lot of fundamentals that are similar. So that ended up being like really perfect to bring you in to kind of match, what I've done and what I'm good at, but then also what you've learned in your experience. And it was just huge. So I know we're going to talk about that, but one thing I do want to mention, kind of wrap up the second phase of finding the right fit, was I wanted to make sure, number one, you had the bandwidth to be able to do it well, but I also wanted to see what your vision was. And I remember asking you, like, where do you foresee yourself with the business? And what I liked about what you said was that you were really interested in having almost like a family-run business. Like it was personal to you. You didn't want to just build a business up in 2 years and sell it, because I did not want to do that with my clients. I wanted somebody who was going to be in it for the long haul. And yeah, that ended up being a great pair for me, because I listened to your vision and I was like, man, it really put me at ease in that first conversation. Yeah.
No, and it's, and part of that's with our adoption. We're wanting to have some opportunities for our kids kind of baked in, if they choose to go that route, and having a family business is very beneficial for that. My 10-year-old daughter already talks about the fact that one day she's going to own it. So we'll see.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So she's pretty close. And I think in what you wrote here, I'm looking at the document you sent, but you kept an eye on colleagues who were client focused and had the same values. And in parentheses, you said not necessarily the same vision and goals that you had. And I remember in our conversation, I was very clear back that, like, listen, I'm not looking to be somebody's puppet. Like, if I own something, I own it. I'm calling the shots, but I'm always seeking advice and wise counsel. But I didn't want to have to like go 50 rounds with you, on something. And you were like, no, like you're going to be in that CEO role, and your decisions to make and stuff like that. So that was important because, I do want to expand our services and other stuff. So anyway, I think that's an important thing to look for.
Yeah. And I think that leads us right into phase 3, which is making the deal, because there was quite a few different routes that we explored. And I found, from the advice that I talked with from my mentors when I did calls with all of them, I kind of came to the realization, I remember you and I talking about this, Eric, there's really 3 ways to go. You can either just sell the business flat out, just sell it and then be gone after a certain amount of time, whether you make a contractual deal to like assist with the assist with all the details and then just disappear. You could merge, which is there's pros and cons to either one of these. Merging would have been like, you having, say, 70% of the business and me having 30 to take on certain roles. But what we did was kind of a hybrid approach, which I really enjoyed and was what I was really wanting, which was to sell/merge. So sold the business, but I am retaining 10% of the business, but I'm not the CEO anymore. Again, going back to what you just mentioned, and you had some, reservations about this. You asked me like, are you going to be the guy leading the ship, or is that going to be me? And I said, that's you. If we merged and we each had like a 50-50 cut or something, that would be a whole nother ball game, and that's where partnerships get really hairy with a lot of people that merge. I remember one of my mentors said, or my current business coach was like, do not merge it's just partnerships like that never work out. So I was much more interested in selling, but I also, again, in Transit's my baby. my clients are, I love my clients. I still do. And we'll talk about how I follow up with them. But it was something I wasn't going to lightly just give up. So I wanted to make sure, I still had some skin in the game, but I didn't want to do the day-to-day. And I really needed you to run, because you're a visionary, you're a dreamcaster, and you're a go-getter just like me. I needed someone to take that seat. And so what we came up with was, after kind of going back and forth, I laid out some options. Had I just sold it outright, I'll just tell everyone the deal was a bigger sale price, but then I would just stay on as a consultant for like a year just to help you out with all the clients, all the transition. And then after that, I'm gone. But I did not want to go that route. I still wanted to have some skin in the game. But again, I didn't want it to be this like 50-50 thing. So I think we came up with the best thing possible, which was a lesser sale price over a period up to 10 years that you're paying back. And then I still have 10% of the business as well, which, to be honest, it wasn't a sexy sale. So like when I say I sold my business, people probably think, oh, he made $1 million and he can, retire on a yacht.
Do a big check.
That's not the case. No, it was not a sexy sale, but it was a really great long-term decision for both of us. Because the other thing I factored into this too, when it came to finding the right fit, but then also making the deal, was I was very cognizant of your situation, Eric. Like, I realized that you were going to be stepping away for the church. That was a lot of your stable income. And I didn't want to put your family at risk. Like, I didn't want you to have to pay me a huge check and then go into hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt just to buy the business. Because the other thing to think about here within transit was, as I mentioned, we were still in the six-figure range, but the numbers had dipped a little bit. And that's just because I wasn't marketing and innovating. But truthfully, the business wasn't worth that much, because the business, aside from Jonathan doing the design and my other subcontractors, the majority of the business was still me. And that's a big lesson for anyone curious about selling their business. If you want to sell, you really have to get yourself out of all the roles first. Otherwise, you are the business. So within transit, I was still like 75% of the business. It was still primarily me. I was doing all the onboarding, all the sales. And I had thought again about, getting myself out of those seats and bringing people on. But, had I not had joshhall.co, I probably would have done that. But I just want to focus on courses. I want to do my podcast. I want to focus on courses. I want to focus on helping other web designers. I didn't want to have to bring somebody on to do sales and project management and then have to worry about the taxes for all that as well. So it really ended up being...
And then replace them when they leave.
Yes, exactly.
Eventually that person's going to, and you're going to have to now step back into that role. Maybe you haven't been doing it for 3 years. There's a lot to that.
Yes. Yeah. There was a lot like in the future that I saw that I just knew I didn't want to deal with. So I say all that to say, I feel like we came up with the best approach. I mean, basically what I did was I laid out those options for you. We talked about it. We slept on it. I think you came back to me like the day after that, or maybe 2 days later, and you said, hey man, here's my offer. Here's what I'm thinking, which is what we came up with, which was,
through a Loom video.
Through a Loom. Yep. Through a Loom. Yeah. This was not like high level stuff. This is Loom video and Google Docs that we did this through. But that's the deal we made, where it was the sale price over a certain period, with a smaller percentage tacked on to the 10% ownership of my cut. But that was it, and it worked out great. And then the thing I appreciated about that was we got going on it. So before we get talking about how we got going on it, do you have anything on your end? What did that look like on your end when we were talking about the deal from your perspective?
It was, I researched a lot. Like I talked to the bank. I talked to a business coach and stuff like that. And just with everything going on with COVID, like I didn't want to go, and add debt to our family. We were able to just come through our adoption process debt-free. Didn't want to do that. We had all of these things about to hit us with, therapies and things like that accompany, an adoption experience. And so I just appreciated being able to come back to you and say, hey, here's the deal that I can do. And you took it and came back to me and said, yeah, like that was great. So I think having that, we were both very transparent. We took, in leadership, I have several favorite axioms. And one of my favorite axioms is take the conversation the last 10%. Generally, people leave a meeting and they have the meeting after the meeting driving home. I should have said, If you're going to be a leader, leaders take the conversation the last 10%. They say everything that has to be said. And I feel like we both did that. we came to the table, laid all of our cards on the table, because bad things grow in the dark. We put light on all of it, and I think we were able to make a wise choice because of that.
That's a great analogy, man. Yeah, I feel that 100% because I feel like we were both. That was one thing I appreciated about you too. There was no beating around the bush. It was, here's what I'm thinking, and here's what I'm thinking, and I felt like we'd never had any strife or pushback. I mean, and the thing was, is I was quite open to, because I think I told you this right from the get-go. I wasn't looking for a big payday so I could go do nothing on the beach for a few years. I was looking to hand this stuff off to somebody I know, like, and trust, and who's going to do well for my clients so that I can focus on joshhall.co. So it was a little bit different than if somebody's like purposely building up a business just to retire, which I'll be honest, I don't know if I'm ever going to retire. Like, I feel like I barely work now because I'm doing what I love to do. Even with web design, for the most part, I loved everything about it. So I just can't imagine just not doing anything. So that, that wasn't the goal. And I made that very clear. And then you made your goals clear too. I mean, I wanted to hear about your vision and what you had in mind. And I think I could tell that we were both very interested in doing this, but not dragging our feet. I mean, we moved on it. Didn't we make the deal? I think we made the deal on May 28th, if I remember right.
It was right that last week of May. And the deal was the go date would be July 1st.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talked in early May. I think it was only a couple weeks, maybe the second week in May, that we had our first call. We went back and forth, talked a few times a week there. And then I'm pretty sure it was May 28th that we were like, all right, let's do it. Let's go. And then, we were like, July 1st, that's when the things were going to officially change. And that gave us June to get all of our ducks in a row, which perfectly, man, I mean, talk about segue. This is like the dream segue episode. That segues into phase 4, which is planning the change. Now, this is where the work came in. Now, up to this point, there was a lot of emotional and mental work, but here is where the physical, like, boots on the ground work came in, because we had to figure out how we're going to do this change, which it's so funny because I think a lot of businesses, depending on how it's structured and how it's set up, I don't think that many businesses have too much to do during a sale, excuse me. Of course there are, but with a web design business, it's not a simple, like, here's a client list and here's our previous stuff. There's ongoing, there's hosting, there's maintenance, there's relationships, there's their logins, there's subscriptions. There's all these little pieces to a website business that need to be accounted for. And I'll hold my hand up first in saying the problem that I faced, which I kind of knew was going to, not a problem, but it was just going to be something we had to work through, was that the majority of this was in my head. I have done really good at laying out my processes, primarily through my courses over the past couple years, and did much better over the past couple years with organizing our files and all stuff like that. But there was still a lot I did not realize that was still in my head. So when it came to planning this change, and before we talk about planning, I did want to mention you and I did write that contract out and we signed it. So you and I signed it before. We did put something in writing, so it wasn't just a handshake and
had other people look at it.
And we had other people look at it. Yep. Because I had my CPA looked at it and she's like, yep, let's do it. And I did talk with my CPA as well. But once we got into doing this is, again, when the real work started. And we had to kind of plan this out. We gave ourselves a little over a month to basically hand everything over and, basically plan the change out. So we'll talk about what I call handing over the keys in the next phase. But there was quite a bit that went into the planning. There was the planning of, for me, the internal business stuff. There was the business name. There was the accounts. There was the funds we had in the business. There were, Stripe and PayPal that was pointed to the business. The other thing that made it a little more tricky on my end was that I had joshhall.co funneling into InTransit. So the numbers were like half InTransit, half joshhall.co. And I was open with you about that because on the books, it looked very confusing. But luckily, since I have different PayPal and Stripe for joshhall.co, it's pretty easy to segregate the numbers. But there was a lot of that. Had to let my CPA know. I actually had to talk to my attorney and let him know about the change because I never had joshhall.co as an LLC or an entity because of tax purposes. I never wanted to pay taxes on two different entities. So I essentially had all joshhall.co funneling through in transit. So I needed to set up joshhall.co as an entity. Now it's official, Josh Hall Co. LLC, holla. So that was official by July 1st, which I think it was official and June 29th is when we finally got the form back from the state. So it was like, woo, we just made it before July 1st. But there was a lot of planning to this. And there was the planning of all the client stuff, their files, their details, their logins, and all that good stuff. Anything else on your end that you wanted to mention when it came to like planning out this big change that we were going to start? Because we kind of started handing over the keys, but July 1st was official. Like that's when it really went down.
Yeah. So reaching out and getting to know the folks on your team, the freelancers you were using, another team, Jonathan and all that, and figuring out, how we were going to work together, and, because we wanted to keep everybody on. So bringing on my team and your team and meshing all of that. But also I had to sit back and reconsider my morning routine, my typical calendar. Like, I knew I was going to suddenly have a lot more time that I was going to have to put to this. And so I had to think through all of that and really rearranged my entire calendar, and had to start handing off some things at church right away. And just because I didn't want to, I didn't want my kids to sacrifice time, because dad was doing this. And so, so there was a lot of that, just preparing myself and then figuring out, okay, what do I need to tell Coastal City creative clients, and how does that work, and our banking, and, Stripe and stuff. Now, I will say the convenient thing was setting up my business using your courses. My systems mirrored you 90%.
Yes.
So that was nice.
I was going to say the same thing when it came to handing stuff over. Like the fact that you were a student who had been through most all my courses, like I didn't have to train you on everything and go through all this stuff and go through my processes. Like you knew how it was set up, and that's how I have my clients organized. And yeah, that was, gosh, I mean, looking back, I'm so thankful.
Yeah.
That,
and it made it super easy to bring on like Jonathan and Christian, and, the two of them began having meetings and working together. And, so our team started connecting, and building relationships. And so that's been kind of cool to see happen, and so, yeah, it's been cool.
Dude, we made a dream team. I mean, there's no other way to cut it. I mean, that was one really cool thing is I didn't realize what great people you had already. And I had known Christian because Christian came through my business course, and we were talking quite a bit. And Christian's he's helped me out with some, like Christian's way better than I am with CSS and jQuery. And so he's actually helping me out with a lot of stuff. And then Jonathan's better than I am at CSS now, being that he's been doing it for 2 years for In Transit. So like we really created this dream team, and yeah, we kind of planned that out and got them all together. And same thing here. Like that was one reason I asked you, do you have the bandwidth for this? Because you're going to take on, what was it, 50, I think it was like 59 clients altogether, something like that, between A, B's, and C's.
The maintenance and hosting. And then an additional, 100 or so that weren't on maintenance and hosting, but, past projects and stuff like that.
Yeah, so there was a lot like that. I knew for you that would be it was different for me because I was in a place where I could pretty much clear June to just focus on this because with the joshhall.co stuff, I was just continuing to produce content, but I wasn't working on a new course or anything like that. I could focus on this. Now with you're running your business, doing the church, and taking this on as well. So we really had to kind of stagger that out. But what I liked what we did was we created a schedule. We created a calendar. We were like, week 1, we're going to do this. Week 2, we're going to do this. I mean, really, with what you and I have learned through project management, we basically just made this a project and followed our own rules. And it was awesome. Like we were our own dream clients because we both gave each other the content we needed immediately. So, I mean, that's what we did. We literally just made this a project. And then through the end of May and through June, we had our deadlines and we just checked everything off. And I guess this brings us to phase 5, which I'm dubbing handing over the keys, which planning and handing over the keys, this is where all the work was. Starting with, and this was the big thing I was trying to figure out, how the heck can I turn over, almost 60 clients who are doing maintenance and hosting with me, but then also another 30 or 40 who I've done projects for in the past that still might be really good clients that occasionally reach out. Like there was a lot, I mean, there was over 100 altogether, like clients that you're going to be talking with at some point. So what I did was, first of all, I organized clients into A, B, and C. A clients being the best clients, B's being like pretty good clients, C's being like, they might do hosting. They may leave one day, or they, maybe they're just a low budget, or, maybe they're just not a great fit or whatever. So I had those there. And what I did was for all the A and B clients, and actually I think I did them for most of the C's, was I created little walkthrough videos of every client. Very and for you, I'm sure it was like, it was very time consuming to do that, because I did either a 2 to 5 to sometimes 10-minute video of all these clients one by one. And the thing was, though, is for me, it saved so much time in the long run, because you didn't have to be like, hey, Josh, randomly, who's this one client? When did you meet them? Like, what's the situation? I created all these Loom videos. I just pulled up their website, talked about them as a client. The one thing that makes it even more confusing with web design is a lot of my clients have multiple sites, and there's different hosting plans for them. There's different deals we worked out. Some have hosting here and some have hosting there. Some are hosting with us. Some have domains elsewhere. So we have one white label client that has multiple sites under one different domain. So there's all these different situations that I basically did these walkthrough videos for. But then I just created a folder in Loom for you. They were videos to Eric. And then you're able to reference those one by one. So when somebody from, this one client reaches out, you just go to their video, you watch my 2 to 5 minute video. You're like, oh, okay, now I know who they are, how they knew Josh, how long they've been working, what their situation is with hosting and maintenance, where their website's at, and we could go from there. So how did that work out, man? Did you appreciate that? Did it help you save some time?
I still go to those videos and watch it, because it's like, wait, who was this? And like, so that has been very, very beneficial. Having that in the relationship, and then just being able to tell people like, hey, when first conversation, actually Josh shared with me, like it honestly set me up to look better than I am, because it sounded like I knew them and I had just learned all I did was repeated what I had just learned 5 minutes before the call.
Great point.
Video and was like, okay. Jump on the Zoom. Hey, how's it going? Josh told me that you did this last time. And so and I think that helped the clients feel comfortable with everything, the A client.
Yeah, because I didn't want to turn, and again, I love my clients. Like, this isn't something where I was sick of my clients and I was burnt out. I just wanted to disappear. This was like the heart and soul for me. So I was really intentional about making sure the clients felt welcomed and like we were taking this very seriously. And I think that's great to hear that, a client would set up a call with you and then you'd be able to say like, oh, hey, yeah, Josh filled me in on your website, where you're at, how long you've been working together. And it really did. Wow. I'm so glad. I didn't really think about the level of detail on how that helps a client feel trusted and secure and safe. Because when from a client perspective, if the business they're working with gets sold, that's scary territory, particularly since we're dealing with websites. It's like, well, who's going to have control of my website? What's going on? And we'll talk about here what I did when I let clients know. But that was a big thing, is just, informing you, Eric, on all these clients one by one and having those videos as references. We didn't do it on one call. And then in a month from now, you'd be like, crap, who did Josh say this client was? These are reference points that you can refer back to. And I think that's invaluable. Yeah.
Some of the videos I've had to go back and, you can see on the view count, I've had to watch some of them, 4 or 5 times, because I don't know, there's just a lot. You have a lot of clients that their first name starts with J.
Yeah.
There's like, wait, which Jeremy, Jerry, Gary, like,
right.
And I was really confused on who I was talking to and nervous that I was going to get on and go, oh, and by the way, your real estate website. And they go, I'm a barber. Like,
right. Yes. And then the other aspect to that is with clients, it's not just one client. A lot of times they have a team. So there's several clients where there's like my main point of contact, but then there may be a couple secondaries. So I had to explain all that in those videos. Either way, if you're going to sell your business one day, doing something like that is well worth the time. I have no regret in taking the time to do that. And on a funny note, since those videos were not edited or polished, I just busted through them. And I think at one point I just let out this huge burp in one of the videos and I didn't cut it out since I was editing. And didn't you say your wife walked in and was like, what was that?
She had come into my office for something. And she was in here and all of a sudden you're just talking away and then just belch and you just kept talking. And she had no idea I was watching the video. She thought I was doing something. And she looks over and she's like, and I'm like, it's a video. He just recorded. And it was.
She's like, wow, this is the guy who's selling the business.
Guy,
wow.
No wonder he had to sell us, but no, he didn't.
Yeah, right.
I was gonna say those videos were great, and actually, it spurred an idea that I think what we're gonna start doing with all of our client websites is record all new clients, record 2 little videos. One, a background video about the relationship, and this is all in case Eric gets hit by a bus, file. Yes. Or I win the lottery and disappear tomorrow, whatever. But the other one I think we're going to do is we're going to record a background, a tour of the back end of a website, because that's been the thing that caught me off guard. Like I think it was like the very first or second day of July, I get a call an email from one of the clients. Hey, can you make this update? No problem. I update our client website. I never thought it would be a problem. I logged in and all of a sudden I went, wait, I have no idea where this is. And then did he put this in, I can't get it to change. Is it in CSS somewhere? Is it, how did this get handled? Wait, what plugin is doing this?
Yeah.
And it didn't dawn on me that even though I took your courses and there's so much similarity things in web design, every web designer does things completely different.
And you're seeing the evolution of me as a designer. So when you're editing old sites, you're probably like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I took his courses. But then you're seeing new sites and you're like, dang, I'm privileged to be working on this.
Okay, good. Well, but I don't remember what it was, but I logged in the one site and I'm like, this isn't
Divi. Yeah. So the good news is, for anyone gonna sell your business, you want to make sure the person is comfortable with all the same tools. And luckily, you and I use all the same tools. We use Divi, WordPress, Gravity Forms, a lot of the same tools. However, there were a lot of customizations in a lot of those sites. Some had unique plugins. There were, I think, what do we have? Maybe 3 sites that are pre-Divi. Some of these sites, I think that site that you mentioned, I think I built that in 2012. So I didn't use Divi till 2014. So there were a couple situations like that but again, this is why I made sure I had skin in the game. So you're not afraid to reach out to me to ask questions. And I'm not I'm not disappearing. I'm also prepared.
I'm no longer my thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm prepared. This is a part of the deal. You have a question because this theme isn't Divi. I'm like, oh, yep, no problem. Yep. Here's where, do this. Although, in a lot of situations, it creates upsells for you to be able to revise these sites. Because that's the other big thing, too, is with this merge, with this sell here, most of the sites were done. So we didn't have too many ongoing. So it wasn't, which I think, honestly, in hindsight, I think was a great thing. Because had I had 15 projects we were right in the middle of, it would have been really, really... It would have made this much more confusing. But luckily, we had just wrapped up a couple big ones, only had a couple big ones in the mix, and then the rest of it was just ongoing updates and stuff like that. So with our maintenance plan. So it actually worked out really well. But yeah, there were a lot of things when it came to handing over the keys that, I tried to make your life as easy as possible. I also wanted to save time from both of our ends. And then when it came to handing over clients, so here's the big thing. And I toiled over this. I told you. This was by far the most emotionally draining aspect of it. Is I'm like, how the heck am I going to tell my clients this? How do I go about it? How do I approach it? I wanted to make it clear. What was really difficult for me was I wanted to make sure it was very clear that you were taking over as CEO, but I'm not disappearing completely. But they shouldn't reach out to me for ongoing updates. So I really had to think through this. I came up with this email, this outline, looked at it the next day, and I was like, this is just, I'm confusing myself. This is going to be extra confusing for clients. So I did what I love to do when it comes to writing, went to a local coffee shop and just sat there and just kind of formulated this email that I felt like really articulated the changes, but also talked about what to expect moving forward, but also introduced you, and then really got them excited. I tried to make sure clients were like freaking out, like, oh my gosh, Josh is selling this. I made it very clear, what we were doing and to be excited. And what was really cool about that was some of my clients knew about joshhall.co. Most of them did not, though. So it came as a shock to a lot of my clients. So I was very clear in saying, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically what I did is I just say, hey guys, I'm sharing some really exciting and important news. If you didn't already know, I started this personal brand endeavor at joshhall.co where I help other web designers learn how to build sites and grow business of their own. And I said, basically, in short, it's really picked up. It's been a true passion and a dream come true. And I'm moving to do it, on a much more, full-time basis. So within transit, and I said this to most all clients, I said, you may or may not have noticed that, or you may have noticed that I feel like my attention has waned a little bit, and that's not what I want for you. I want the best for you. So I brought in one of my students who is basically going to act, is coming in as CEO of InTransit and is going to be your primary contact moving forward. And then you and I did a little video together. We recorded a Loom video, just me explaining the email, explaining the changes, and then introducing you so they could get to know you. And then we followed up with a schedule or a link so they could schedule a virtual coffee with you. And then depending on the client situation, I would customize part of it. I did make it a template, but I would just customize little parts depending on the relationship I have with the client, what they knew. Some of my clients worked with Jonathan more directly than they did with me. Whereas some of my older clients, I had the closer relationship with. So there was a lot of that. But man, I'm not going to lie, that was an emotionally draining thing. And I remember it was a Thursday morning when I sent that email out, when I went through my client list one by one, because this is the other thing, I did not want to do an email blast. I did not want to make it this cheesy type of, I wanted them to feel personal. Better, ideally I would have had a phone call to let somebody know. But at the same time, I think that would have made it more difficult because then they would have been like, so are you going to introduce me to this new guy? I like doing the email route one by one. But man, when I did each one of those, I was shaking the first few emails because it was huge. It was like a lot. I was like, how are clients going to respond? Are they going to hate me? Are they going to bail? I was really kind of nervous about that. And then I'll never forget, I was a handful in, I think I had sent 6 or 7. And then I started getting some emails. And then of course I'm like, oh, here we go. Let me see how it goes. First thing I see, congratulations, Josh. I'm so happy for you. So excited. I was like, oh, thank goodness. And that was Glinda from Sylvan Trucking. I want to give a shout out to her because she made me feel so much better. Then I heard from one of my other clients, SafeX, who was like, my best client. They were like, really excited for you. So happy for you. Very excited about the changes and working with Eric. Because one thing too, as I mentioned, we're going to be able to offer a lot more and expand our service and do a lot more for them. So I started getting those emails, and some clients, of course, were going to voice some concerns saying like, yeah, I'm just, like, who's going to be my contact? Are they local? They're in the same time zone. And for me, that was another big thing I meant to mention earlier. Ideally, I always wanted to find someone local because most of my clients are still local, although we have them all over the country and a few abroad now. But the next best thing was finding someone in the same time zone. So with you being in Virginia, me being in Columbus, Ohio, we're on the same Eastern time zone. So that ended up working out just fine. And let's be honest, particularly through COVID, ain't nobody meeting in person these days. So it didn't really matter. But yeah, man, I don't know what I CC'd you on all of those. I don't know what it looked like from your end, but man, that was definitely a draining part of this journey emotionally. Yeah.
No, I can only imagine because for me and my clients, it wasn't that. We just for our end, we just sent out a thing and said, hey, we're now called InTransit Studios. That was it. So because that was what we did. So what we did is Coastal City Creative is still the parent company, and then we set InTransit up as a DBA in Virginia, and that's our client-facing side, and then we're rebranding Coastal City Creative to handle just our white label side of things. So that's a little bit something we're doing. Yeah. And to be honest, then a couple of those clients you mentioned, like SafeX, for example, like immediately scheduled a virtual coffee, and, we got on and we had a just 60 seconds of pleasantries. And I just reminded them, hey, I watched this video. I know your background, stuff like that. And I took Josh's courses. So I operate the same way Josh does. So I'm already in that line. And they're like, great, let's get going. And I mean, within 90 seconds on every call, right down to business.
Oh,
and
that's so beautiful.
Yeah. And so we were able to just get going. I'm like, yep, we can make that change. Yep, we can do that. And so I think it helped them go, okay, good. He knows what he's doing. Nothing's really changing for me, and people have asked about the new services that we're rolling out. And I would say the other thing we worked on, I was just thinking about this, looking back up through a couple steps ago, we focused everything on client. Like if you go to the In Transit Studio website right now, like you're still it is like next quarter is when I've planned to get to the website. Like that was that was the lowest priority.
Yeah.
The first priority was clients.
Yeah. We wanted to make sure the change was streamlined. And we really wanted to, for me, it was important to have some continuity there, which is why I'm so glad. Because one thing we talked about was like, should we change the name? Should it be Coastal Transit Creative? And like, what should we do? So we merged. So we just come up with something completely different. And when you asked about what I wanted to do with the name In Transit Studios, I was open to you taking that over as well, because again, you're taking over the business. So I love that. And I think In Transit as a name lends itself to a more global audience than the name Coastal, because, somebody in the Midwest isn't coastal. Although, it really doesn't matter. The name does not matter that much. And to be honest,
except for the fact your site has more domain authority and SEO juice.
Domain authority.
So that was a significant part of the decision for me.
Yeah, and there's a lot of links from Elegant Themes going back to it. Yeah. All my courses. Yeah, I have built that up. I mean, I never really SEO'd that site, but inevitably I've been running it for almost a decade. It has built domain authority. So yeah, that was a big point. And I love that we kept the name, because if my clients just talked with this new guy named Eric from a different state with a whole different company, it may have felt like, whoa, that's a lot of change. I love that we kept the name, because it's, you have the In Transit email address, domain. Yes, we did not, we made a few adjustments to the site, but that's like phase 2. We're not worried about that yet right now. Because honestly, like half of my clients don't even know the business name. They just knew Josh, my web design guy. So that was not as big of a concern. And I do want to say for anyone, because I know a lot of my students look at my site as an example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically put a backup of the site on a subdomain just for references from my experience and how I built the site as a solopreneur. So I'm going to have a backup from, In Transit from a few months ago before we made any changes, Eric. And I'm going to have that as reference. And then as we change In Transit, people will see it morph into the more of the agency style site. But don't worry, because I just talked to somebody recently who asked about that. Don't worry, I am going to make sure my In Transit site as a solopreneur is going to be up somewhere as a reference point.
And that comes back to the whole synergy thing.
Yeah.
That we talked about. Like the having that partnership still, like, and we've even said, like, we're still going to be as a team, as, developers, we're able to feed you continually, feed you stuff for, CSS tutorials and things like that. And you still completely handle your Josh Hall site. It's not like you're no longer even using Divi or anything. But there's just this synergy. And as the CEO owner, I'm getting a lead at least once or twice a week from people from the Josh Hall courses, that's either took some tutorials or courses. One guy last week we talked and he's like, I tried, he showed me a site. He goes, I'm just in over my head. I need somebody to finish it. That's a couple $1,000 lead that I would not have gotten before this.
Synergy is the word. You said that from one of our first calls and I loved it. And it's absolutely true. I wanted to make sure the business would continue to feed my business at joshhall.co, because let's be honest, my content is based off of real world experience and I'm never letting that go. Like luckily I've been doing it for 10 years. I could talk for years on end about stuff I've learned in my past decade. But what's really cool and what I love about our setup is that I have all this experience as a solopreneur. And then I have my experience over the past few years in scaling as a kind of small team. But now I have the experience of overseeing you as we're doing stuff as an agency. So like I'm getting ready to revamp my website maintenance plan course. And what's really cool is now I have maintenance plan offerings as a solopreneur, as a small team, and as an agency. Like there's these different tiers, there's different, areas in your journey. You can, where are you at? Do you want to do a maintenance plan as a solopreneur? Here's what I did. If you want to do it as an agency, here's what we're doing, so it's really, really cool. The synergy is incredible because again, we are feeding each other. And dude, I haven't even started, like I thought about creating a, get help for your website on my site. And that's going to be huge, so there's all that kind of stuff that really feeds into this nicely. So it really, it set me at ease to the whole thing. There was not one point, because I remember my wife asked me a few weeks into it. She's like, how do you feel? Do you feel like you did the right thing? Does it feel weird? I'm like, honestly, I have not had any feelings of doubt or regret or red flags. Like it went too well. We had a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. There was a lot of things that both you and I had to kind of figure out, and particularly from like the books and the spreadsheets and all the client info and their, recurring billing, because you have a different billing system than I had set up. So we had to do all that. Some of that was, that was the unfun stuff. But primarily it went pretty dang well, man. Knock on wood. We're still at the tail end of it, but it seemed a little too good to be true all around.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And my wife was asking me, and she said, she goes, the weirdest thing for me is you two have never met in person. She's like, this is the weird thing. Like, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, for outside people in industries, yeah, it probably seems weird, but for web designers, we're used to it. And luckily, going back to the trust your gut, like I trusted my gut with you. I felt like you were an upstanding guy who, I felt like I've been able to read people very quickly, and I can tell whether they're legit or they're full of shit. And I felt like you were legit. And that showed through. It kind of reaffirmed me as we got through the process. I was like, man, I'm so glad I went with Eric. And then again, I learned a lot from you during the whole process with organization. Like you are way better with Google Docs and spreadsheets than I am. I actually was like, how did he do that with the thing here? Like, there's a lot of things like that I actually kind of picked up and learned from you. And what's really cool is now I'm applying it to my joshhall.co stuff. And man, talk about synergy again, going back to our teams merging. Michelle, our SEO specialist, who I'm actually going to have on the podcast here soon, we're working together. She did an SEO audit on my site at joshhall.co. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Made me feel kind of awesome because my domain authority is getting up there. However, like it's going to make me take a whole different approach with how I produce content, being data-driven and SEO-driven. So, she's just a world-class SEO audit, specialist who I'm referring to my students left and right now. Like she's like my SEO gal. Cam, who I mentioned, who does the VA services for In Transit now, does all our reporting. She's coming on board with me to help me out with the podcast and a lot of the stuff I'm doing with joshhall.co. Christian and Jonathan, like you mentioned, are designers. They're mingling and talking together and doing awesome stuff. Amber, who I'm having, is going to be the episode, I think, shortly before this one. Our email domain guy, he came from my side, but you're using him like crazy now. So
he's amazing.
Yeah, we really, we created this dream team, which is another benefit of merging two teams together and not screwing over your team. That was the other big thing too, is for me, the other big aspect to all this, quite frankly, was Jonathan, because Jonathan is working full time for In Transit, and he had been with me since right before my daughter was born, and we were in the NICU, and he's a big part to me being able to do joshhall.co, quite frankly, because he was designing all the sites for In Transit. So you asked me, what's the situation with him? And after we talked, I let him know, and Jonathan told me, he was like, I kind of wondered if you were going to talk to Eric. And what was really cool about that too is previous to that, when you were on my podcast, he randomly messaged me and was like, I feel like, or I think he said something to the tune of, I could see Eric being a really good person to like partner up with and have as a referral partner and do some work with. And so I knew like he was interested in working with you too. So I didn't want to just surprise Jonathan either. But Jonathan knew, like he knew, he was working on that area of In Transit, but he knew I was focused primarily on joshhall.co. So, yeah, man, apart from all that, and then apart from, turning over the client stuff versus all the internal stuff, I think that was pretty much, the gist of handing over the keys, phase 5, unless there's anything else you can think of before we wrap this up.
No, I think that's good. I think you're, I learned you're way more organized in your systems of like, building a site and checklist and things like that. So that was great to inherit and bring on and has really elevated that kind of stuff. But I think for me, the big takeaway is leveraging the power of those little videos for the just in case, because something happens to me, my wife and kids are relying on this income. She's not going to step in and do this. So setting her up with a business that she can sell or, and work with you and stuff like that, like that's important. So I would say the big takeaway for somebody listening to this is, even if you're not planning to sell your business one day, if you're going to really be a business owner, you still have to think of that next step. You need to have a succession plan, even if you never use it. And so, leveraging some of that, I think would be the big takeaway for people that
and a disaster plan. If I get hit by a bus plan, what happens? Like, does anyone else have access to my client files? Does anyone else have access to my stuff? The business bank accounts, like, that's where having a significant other is crucial and helpful in that, because at least they could have access, God forbid. But I think having trusted colleagues for that type of thing is valuable too, which is eventually when I start a membership, that's where people are really going to be able to make these really good colleague connections. I'm not saying you want to give everyone access to your files, but you do need to have someone trusted that would ideally at least know a little bit about web design so they could help out in case of an emergency. So we'll probably do a separate episode on disaster planning, but it's definitely something to consider and think about. So
I call it succession planning because it's not as scary.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But I would view that as more like retiring or moving on, as apart from like I
think it includes it all. For me, it doesn't. Yeah. Yeah. So
I guess succession could include getting hit by a bus, right? I guess either.
We always had a succession plan for the church that was, intentional or accidental, need for replacement of the pastor. So.
Nice. Yep. And then finally, just to cap this off, phase 6 is just kind of wrapping it all up and then following up. For me, you and I we still stay in regular, touch with everything, but we don't do like scheduled weekly calls, but through June and then through July, we still talked a lot. Now I did go on vacation for a couple weeks in July, which was amazing because you just ran everything. It was the first time where I felt like I really had like a true, I don't have to worry about jack crap vacation. Because, well, thank goodness, because we brought both of our daughters, so it was nonstop work, but like the previous year, Jonathan was doing everything, so we didn't have any emergencies, and if we did, he could handle it. So that felt really good. But this was the first time where I got back from vacation, and I think I had like 3 emails in my in transit, and 2 of them were for you. So like it was amazing, not to have 50 emails backed up that I need to get to. So that was incredible, and it was good that we gave ourselves those deadlines to stay on task. So I could go on vacation. It was really, for me, just to be transparent, it was a nice end of one chapter and start of a next, because we had made the sale, everything was done by middle of July. When I came back, we kind of took the next step, and really that was checking in with you, answering questions periodically that you had. And then I have started kind of following up with my A clients just to see how stuff's going. Last week I met with one of my A clients, who she's our realtor and a personal friend of the family anyway. And then the other big aspect to this was my networking group, because since I wasn't doing the sales for In Transit, I stepped away from my networking group that I helped start back in 2012. So that was another big emotional piece. Now, those are all still kind of my crew. It's one reason I love networking is they're all like my auto mechanics there, my realtors there, my loan guys there, my financial advisors there. So they're all still my crew, but I'm just not seeing them on a regular basis because I'm not the salesman for In Transit anymore. But that said, they know, most of them know you, and then they can always reach out to me and I can direct them to you. But with that said, I have been kind of checking in on my best clients just to see how stuff's going, to make sure, you're taking care of them. And it's like, everything's been great. I haven't had anyone say I'm not really comfortable with this. So it's been really cool, man. That's kind of what I'm doing. I don't know what you have to add as far as this final step. I know this is where the real work for you is kicking in as you're leaving the church and taking In Transit to a whole nother level.
Yeah, no, it's good. Luckily we had a plan, working the plan. And I would say those, and even today, even now, I'll get an email and I'll open it and it'll be like, hey, 3 things. And it's just a link to a Loom video, or just like, hey, real quick. And it's a link to a Loom video. And I'm always like, oh boy, there's always this hesitation of like, oh, is somebody mad? Is somebody upset? And it's always just like, hey, I saw this, I thought of this, this. And I'm like, oh yeah, cool. So
nice.
But yeah, there's, a couple times, especially like after I talk to a client or we work on something, because we've done some projects now where, I went in and built the landing page, or I did work on a client's website and I'm the new designer and stuff like that. And then it was like the next day you get an email from you. I'm like, oh, did they reach out to Josh and complain? But, everybody's been fine. It's been good.
Yeah, it's been great. And that's the other thing is,
I took your courses.
Yeah. Really, I mean, that was crucial, having the same processes. Now we are using Basecamp 3 for In Transit now, which is different from what I use with Basecamp 2. And there are a few things a little different, but it seems like clients are coming around to that with like, I just made it known, if you have an update, reach out to Eric now, not me. And it's gone over really well. And yeah, man, it's wild. I mean, we're at the tail end of this. I know the next phase is talking about the website, and I'm still involved on some higher level stuff. Like we did a call last week with a client. That's kind of few and far between, but it's, I really think it's worked out for.
Yeah. Well, they're wanting to do something. They're wanting to use, this client is wanting to use LearnDash, which you run your courses off of. I've never touched it. And it was just like, listen, we can serve this client and take her project further faster if just you, me, and her get on the call. Or I would have had to go, well, that's a great question. Let me get back to you. And I would have had to call you anyway. So,
well, and that's what's really cool too. Like if I ever get to a point where I'm like, I feel like I need to, maybe I want to get into the sales a little bit just to kind of refine. Maybe I want to try out some things I've learned with some of my guests on my podcast and in my courses. I can always tell you like, hey, Eric, I'm going to be involved on maybe an upcoming like high level project just to, dip my toe. Like there's freedom in a lot of different ways for both of us like that, which I love, man. Synergy.
Yeah, I love, because I'm like, yeah, sure, test it. I mean, we should always be testing things in our business. So, that's the thing from you getting, you're constantly talking to people. So you're doing all of this R&D, which is, if you're going to be a business owner, that part of the innovation is R&D. You got to be doing research and development. You're our R&D department, and so that's great. I don't have to worry about that because you're handling that. So it's just really cool. That's
so true. That's a great point. Yeah, I am essentially just doing all the research and development for In Transit with what I'm doing with JoshHall.co. And then, I mean, basically I'm the R&D for, hundreds of web designers from around the world now, because I'm getting all the info, sharing all the experience and getting all the resources together, and you just apply it. So, and I love that. Who knew? I had no idea I love doing R&D so much, but by golly, you just made me realize I do. So. Well, Eric, this has been great, man. I hope everyone's enjoyed this, getting a peek behind the curtain and kind of hearing what both of you and I went through, from me selling the business to you acquiring it and what we did. I just thought it would be cool to talk about this, to share our experience, and hopefully this helps people. Again, if you're interested in selling, or maybe you're not, but you're just curious, maybe you just want to have it in the back of your mind. So when one day you feel like I did, where it was like, I feel like I'm ready to move on or I need to make a change, this is a good reference for you. And again, just to recap, phase 1 for me was figuring out, realizing when the time was right, or when it's time to make some changes. Phase 2 was finding the right fit. Phase 3 was making the actual deal. Phase 4, planning the change, planning it out, giving yourself deadlines. 5 was actually handing over the keys. And then 6, follow up and, whatever that looks like depending on the situation. So, man, with all that in mind, Eric, do you have any final words for everyone listening?
No. So I would just say, the only thing I would say honestly is, I think it was you one day I first heard it said was, are you trying to build a job? Because if you ever do want to sell one day, nobody wants to buy your job. Somebody wants to have a business. And so invest in yourself, take some courses, begin thinking like an owner, and, because even if you don't want to sell one day, down the road, you'll be so much further ahead if you already have some of this stuff in place. Yeah.
And I would just add to that by saying, get it out of your head and get it on file, get it on paper, maybe not paper, but get your spreadsheets in order, get all the details in order. It would never hurt, like you're talking about, Eric, to make client videos as you go. That's probably something I just never thought about doing that. I'm like, why would I spend time doing that? It's all, I know it's all up here. It's in my head. But it'd be so valuable to do that in any case, even if it's just you, but if you want to start bringing on a team, you have resources that people can watch. So yeah.
And like most of them are under 4 minutes, they're like just real quick. You don't have to go through everything, just a couple highlights. And man, having that repository of those videos, I think is, like I said, not 100%, but really leaning towards adding that to our deploy checklist. If we're done with the site, like add it to Google Analytics, add Google search, record the videos, like just make it part of the process.
And I remember the other thing I did with those videos was I did talk about the personality type of the client a little bit too. I don't know if that helped at all, just so you knew, like, are they a dominant kind of person? Are they more like, what's their motives? Are they more chill? Are they really cautious? Do you need to like not talk about anything price related for a while? Like I tried to include that too, which hopefully helped for anyone, doing that. That's a great thing to do too, just so you can get to know the client. It also gives yourself a refresher. If you have a lot of clients, you might forget, like, what are they like, so it's huge.
Well, and none of my clients at all, I built one website out of all the sites I built where they didn't go on maintenance and hosting and they took on their own website. None of my other clients, I don't have a single client that ever wants to log into the back end of their website. You've got clients that are constantly logging into the back end of their website and doing things. And so that was huge to know and good to know, because I was not expecting that at all.
Yeah, I did. That was a big thing. It just so happened that a lot of my clients wanted to be active, which was so great about the resources, the training resources that I put together on my client training or my client resources page. But that's the beauty about WordPress and Divi and a lot of that. But as we're finding, I think more and more, particularly as we kind of revamp the maintenance plans, we're trying to get away from that to let people just let us do it. But to have that freedom there, it's pretty cool. And that actually makes clients appreciate you even more when they're logging in and they have a question, which is a great time for upsells for other stuff too when they do that. So yeah, that's cool to hear, man.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Well, Eric, thanks so much for your time. I know you got plenty of work to do as CEO of In Transit Studios, so I'll let you get to it, and we'll chat again here, not public, and talk about stuff moving forward. But this has been great, man. Thanks for filling everybody in on your side of stuff. Yeah, this was fun.
You bet.
Awesome. Cheers, man. Hey guys and gals, just wanted to pop in with a couple things before you head out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. I would love to hear your feedback, and it will also help other web designers find the show. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Just go to joshhall.co, click on podcasts, and search this episode number, and you'll find all the links, descriptions, and resources we talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next episode is live. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.